and I remain focused on the important work we do every day to serve the public conversation. We're continuing to make progress on our priorities and remain focused on delivering value to all of our customers. The decisions we make and the work we do now not only bolster how we navigate through this time, but also support the long-term success of Twitter, which I cared about deeply. With that, Sean, Ned, and I are happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Parag. And now we'll turn to questions. Joining us for the Q&A portion of the meeting is our CEO, Parag Agrawal, Ned Siegel, our CFO, and Sean Edgett, our General
네, 이제
Counsel.
Q&A 세션이
We have
시작되었습니다.
about 15
제가
minutes for questions, and only confirmed shareholders as of the
지금
record
방송
date are
제대로
permitted to
나오고
ask
있는지
questions.
채팅으로 확인
Questions can be
부탁해 주시면
asked by typing in the
감사하겠습니다.
box provided on today's virtual meeting platform. We've received a number of questions that shareholders previously submitted during registration, so we'll start by answering those.
일단 먼저
Note that due to
미리
time
받았던
constraints, a
질문들을
shareholder will be permitted no
대답하고
more than 2 questions.
그 다음에
And if there are any matters of individual
주주가
concern to a
최대 2
shareholder,
개까지
we ask
질문을
that
할
you
수
please
있게
email
진행이
your
될
question
것입니다.
to ir@twitter.com. We'll try to answer all questions asked that meet the requirements stated. Due to time constraints, however, or if questions appear to be of individual concern, we may not answer the question during the meeting. We thank you in advance for your cooperation.
시간이 부족하거나 또
Our
질문의
first
특수
question is,
내용 때문에
what
대답이
happens to
못할
the
수도
stock I
있습니다.
own if someone successfully buys Twitter and makes it a private company?
I'll take that one. This is Sean. Thank you for that question. We have definitely received and are continuing to receive a number of your questions related to the pending acquisition of Twitter. And obviously we understand this is an area as shareholders you want to discuss. I'll go back to what Parag said earlier, which is for regulatory and other reasons related to the transaction. We aren't able to address these questions today, and we won't be making
네,
any
오늘
statements about the
질문에
transaction.
답을 드릴 수
But I would
없습니다.
direct you for more information about the proposed transaction to take a look at our preliminary proxy statement for the upcoming special meeting of stockholders, which we filed with the SEC on May 17th of this year. And of course, our other SEC filings, including the final proxy statement when it becomes available.
지금 당장은 말씀드릴 수 없지만 나중에 스페셜 미팅을 통해서 더 자세한 내용을 말씀드릴 수 있습니다.
Conspiracy posts and false election information? And will they ban individuals or politicians who post such misinformation?
Thank you for the question. This is Parag. We remain focused on limiting harm from misinformation on our service through the policies we have around civic integrity, COVID misinformation, manipulated media. We recently announced and started enforcing a new policy around crisis misinformation that applies to some conversation about the war in Ukraine. I'd like to remind folks that our misinformation policies do not address misinformation in a broad-based way, but in narrow areas as I enumerated in the specific policies. Beyond these policies, we've also built and launched several product features like interstitials, labels for additional context, pre-bunks, so as to enable people to find a broader conversation around these topics, as well as more reliable information. Our primary focus is on providing people more context and limiting reach of harmful content. And it's only in very rare instances that our policies lead to enforcement that takes content down or bans individuals. More broadly, improving the health of the public conversation on Twitter remains an essential focus area for us. And this applies across our work on product, policy, and enforcement. We continue to evolve all three of these. Our focus remains on decreasing our reliance on user reports before we take action so that we can be more proactive in improving the health of the public conversation. We also continue to focus on increasing the transparency of our enforcement actions for all of our customers, as well as increasing the consistency that we have in taking these actions at scale. As we do this work, we continue to partner with and seek feedback from governments, civil society groups, and industry all around the world in evolving our approach.
상당히 원론적인 대답을 해주고 계시고요. 이 misinformation과 관련된
And our next
내용에서
question is, why block out one political side and not the other? Social media should be fair for both sides.
Hi, this is Parag again. Thank you for your question. Silencing political commentary is antithetical to our commitment to free speech. We operate our platform and our service all over the world in very different political contexts and use a consistent set of Twitter rules all around the world in order to improve the public conversation on the service. Our tools and processes aim to enforce these rules without any bias and do so dispassionately and equally for all users, regardless of their background, political affiliation, all around the world. Going beyond just politics, we want to show all sides of the conversation about
예, 역시 원론적인 답을 하고
any
있습니다.
topic out there.
이제 정치적으로 한쪽에 좀 치우친 게 아닌가라는 답변에 전 세계 모든 정치에 편향 없이 접근하고 주제가 정치뿐만이 아니라 모든 내용에서 최대한 편향 없이 모든 내용을 다 보여주고자 한다라는 대답을 주었습니다.
We take responsibility for mistakes we make. We seek input and feedback. We strive to learn from our mistakes and continue to evolve our approach as a result. As I said,
트위터와 관련된 내용은 일단 오늘 말을 할 수 없다라고
and our processes in order
이야기를 했고 나중에 추가 정보를 제공해 준다고 했습니다.
for different voices and perspectives to be heard. Our rules are enforced objectively on content
이제
and
또
and our policies remain neutral.
30분, 24분 뒤면은 지난해 4MC 의사록이 발표가 됩니다.
Thank you, Parag. And our next question is, why does the board
이건 방금 말한 거는 좀
Twitter stop?
다른 내용이었는데 이 다음 질문 또 보도록 하겠습니다.
And thank you for this question. So I'll just zoom out a little bit to say we definitely believe stock ownership by our directors aligns their interests with the interests of our stockholders. And that's one of the reasons why our board of directors established stock ownership guidelines for our non-employee directors who receive equity grants as part of their compensation. And under those guidelines, which must be met by the later of September 2023 or 2 years after a director's appointment, each of our non-employee directors must own a number of shares of Twitter stock equal to the value of 2x or 2 times the annual cash board retainer of the prior year. All of our directors are either in compliance or on track to comply with these guidelines by the applicable deadlines. And I just point you to our proxy statement for this meeting on this topic for more information.
Thank you. And our next question is, why doesn't Twitter allow people to rank the importance of the tweets they send and give followers the ability to change their notifications accordingly? Also, why doesn't Twitter allow users to sort who they follow by category?
Thanks for sharing your thoughts and suggestions. First, we love hearing from people who use the service around how we can do better to improve the service for the varied use cases for Twitter. With regards to your specific ideas and suggestions, we agree that ranking and relevance are critical to the Twitter experience. There's a lot more content created on Twitter than anyone can consume. So surfacing the most relevant content around what's happening is really important for the product to work for our customers. You noted notifications. As we've continued to do work on improving the quality and relevance of notifications, we are able to surface what's happening to people based on their interests in a timely way. This has allowed for Twitter to grow in the way we've grown over the years. We work really hard at the same time to decrease the amount of work people have to do, whether it is when they're creating content or when they're consuming content. As a result of removing this friction, we are able to provide more value to our customers. In terms of your suggestions around the ability to customize and organize the Twitter experience, this is a use case we've heard from many of our more sophisticated users. And we've seen people use features that we've built like lists to organize accounts based on categories and topics. We've also enabled people to pin these lists within the Twitter experience to create the tabbed experience that you describe. At the same time, for most users who are not yet fully sophisticated in the use of our service and product, and often during onboarding, we've also seen value by making things easy for our customers through work like followable topics, through work where we build systems and models to discover and detect what people might be most interested in and surface that content to them without them having to do all of the work. So thank you again for your suggestions, and we're so grateful that you're such an active user of the service.
Thank you, Parag. The next question is, can you explain how the compensation committee determined the CEO's compensation?
Thank you for that question. So I'd just start by saying our executive compensation philosophy is definitely oriented towards incentivizing leadership to innovate on our business strategy and enhance our product offerings. And so to do that, we are seeking primarily to do four main things. The first is recruit and retain executives that can deliver long-term value. The second is align executive interests with those of our stockholders. The third is to promote a healthy approach to risk-taking. And the fourth is provide rewards for performance that are commensurate relative to peers in the market. So we review our approach to compensation plan design annually, and we make adjustments periodically based on a variety of factors, including business needs, stockholder feedback, competitive market assessments, and regulatory considerations, among others. And so in setting our CEO's compensation, the board considers many factors, including benchmarks for CEO compensation versus our peers, which you can find in the proxy statement, to provide compensation that's aligned with the market. And then based on the compensation peer criteria and input from management, the compensation committee reviewed and approved a list of companies used to inform compensation practices. Our compensation committee then takes into consideration such comp data from our peers and relies on the business experience of its members and on the recommendations of management to approve compensation packages that are competitive and appropriate for our executive officers. There's a lot more that we put in our proxy statement, so I would refer you there for more fulsome explanation and detailing around the compensation setting. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. So the next question is, what are you doing about accounts that were created a long time ago and never used? Are abandoned accounts removed after a period of time?
Thanks for the question. There are many accounts on Twitter that are not active and not in use on any given day. Keep in mind, though, that as a customer of the service, it may not always be possible to recognize which accounts are active or not, since not all signs of activity are publicly visible. It's also important to remember that many accounts which are not currently active reactivate over time. Sometimes this happens due to major events. Sometimes it's because people find new use cases and reasons to come back to Twitter. And sometimes it's because of timely and relevant emails and notifications that we send to people. Having a pre-existing account removes friction when people find these use cases and reactivate, and has us showing them value faster and sooner. That being said, we do have processes in place to remove inactive accounts if and as we need them.
일단 사실 인수딜과 관련된 내용을 좀 초점을 맞추고 싶었는데 이제
of women on your board of directors?
사실 지금은 이제 본격적인 트위터 내부와 관련된 이야기들이 많이 나오고 있습니다.
Of directors should be diverse. We aim for our board to reflect the diversity of voices on our platform and have actively recruited to incorporate more diversity into our board. Our corporate governance guidelines require our nominating and corporate governance committee to consider a broad range of backgrounds, experiences, and diversity in all aspects of that word, including gender and
이게
ethnic
제가
diversity. As
트위터
it stands, we have 3 women on our board,
주총으로
one of whom was elected just last year.
주제를 잡고 방송을 열긴 했는데 일단 사실 제가 테슬라를 주로 다루고 있으니까 일단 이와 관련된 내용을 이번 방송에서 정리를 하도록 하겠습니다. 그리고 제가 지금 진행되는 이 질문을 좀 듣다가 이번 인수딜과 관련해서 좀 재미난 내용이 나오면 전해드리고 그 이전에는 지금 나왔던 내용들과 관련해서 인수딜과 관련된 내용들 한번 정리를 해볼까 합니다.
Meaningful climate action from all of us is critical. The climate conversation on Twitter has been expanding.
그래서 이번 딜이 어떤 식으로 진행될 것인가에 대해서 좀 재미난 트윗을 제가 발견을 했는데 이것도 뭐 법률 전문가 분들이 필요한데 제가 충분히 검증을 할 만큼 시간을 들인 건 아니고 트위터에서 오고 가고 있는 이야기들, 이제 월가의 애널리스트들 사이에서 오고 가고 있는 이야기들과 관련된 트윗들 좀 보도록 하겠습니다. 이제 이 릭이라는 분과 또 댄 아이브 씨의 이야기인데 일단 이 릭 씨가 이 댄 씨의 의견 자체를 좀 비판하는 트윗을 올렸습니다. 그래서 일론이 간단하게 이번 딜을 철회하고 나갈 수 없다라는 주장을 하셨는데 이제 그 이유가 어떻게 되는지에 대해서 이분이 적으신 의견을 좀 보도록 하겠습니다. 일단 이번에 일론이 사인했던 계약을 보게 되면은 뭔가 엄청난 메이저한 주요한 일이 일어나지 않는 한 일론이 이걸 무조건 사야 되는 책임을 지는 계약이다 라고 말을 하였고 그리고 여기에 함께 또 트위터 측에서 듀 딜리전스를 면제받았다. 그러니까 트위터 측에서 정확하게 모든 내용들을 공지하고 여기에 대한 검증을 받는 절차를 벌써 계약에서 건너뛰기로 했다라고 말을 합니다. 바로 그것 때문에 일론이 그냥 옷이 너무 많기 때문에 이번 계약을 지킬 수 없다라고 말을 할 수 없는 그 근거가 계약에 들어가 있다라는 거고 그래서 일론이 합의된 금액에 사야 되는 상황이고 그리고 트위터 이사회는 그 계약을 지키게 만들기 위해서 노력을 하고 있는 상황이다. 그래서 제가 이분이 뭐 얼마나 법률 전문가인지는 모르겠기 때문에 구체적인 신뢰도에 대해서는 이야기하기가 조금 힘들 것 같은데 이런 이야기도 오고 가고 있다라는 내용을 볼 수 있고요. 이제 여기에 반대해서 제 일론이 펼쳤던 논리를 보게 되면은 결국 인수라는 것도 주주가 되는 것이고 이 주주들에게 정보를 제공해 주는 게 공시 자료인데 이 공시 자료에 아주 심각한 오류가 있다면은 이건 주주에 대한 책임을 트위터 측에서 다하지 못했다. 그리고 여기에 심각한 오류라는 게 이 보세 비율을 들었죠. 그래서 이와 관련해서 이번 딜을 타기 혹은 인수 가격 재조정을 하고자 하는 모습입니다. 그렇죠. 이제 현중님께서 말씀해 주신 것처럼 이 듀 딜리전스가 면제되었다라는 게 결국 이게 법적 해석으로 가게 될 것 같은데 여기서 듀 딜리전스가 이전에 발표했던 그 공지 내용 SEC 파일링까지 면제가 되느냐 아니면 이 SEC 파일링은 모든 주주 그리고 그 밖에 뭐 서플라이어나 기업 관련 모든 사람들에게 공시하는 내용이기 때문에 책임에서 자유로울 수 없다거나 이 싸움이 펼쳐질 것 같습니다. 그래서 좀 난장판은 지금 또 난장판인데 합의가 되지 않는다면은 또 계속 진흙탕 싸움이 한동안 지속될 것 같습니다.
Thank you, Sean. The next question is, what additional steps is Twitter taking to prevent misinformation from running rampant and impacting
그리고 지금 컨퍼런스 콜에서는 또 트위터와 관련한 주요 주제들 비슷하게 계속 나오고 있습니다. 아까 살펴봤던 것처럼 이제 미스인포메이션과 관련된 내용이 많이 나오고 있고, 결국 정치 성향 이야기도 미스인포메이션인 거고, 또 트위터에서 이 중요도를 매겨서 팔로워에게 보내는 것도 정보의 우선순위를 매기는 것들, 그게 주 제품이니까 그 내용이 가장 많이 나오는 것 같습니다. 그리고 복과 관련된 질문도 좀 나와야 될 것 같은데 아직까지는 나오질 않고 있는 것 같습니다. 일단 이번 어닝콜에서 인수와 관련된 직접적인 내용은 하질 않는다라고 말을 했기 때문에 이와 관련된 내용은 못 들을 것 같지만은 이제 일론이 많이 이슈로 삼았던 보세 숫자를 추정하는 방법 혹은 앞으로 새롭게 추정할지에 대한 내용은 나올 수도 있을 것 같아서 조금만 더 들어보고 방송을 끝내도록 하겠습니다.
These three buttons are shared prominently across our product in search and our explore tab and can also be attached to trends when appropriate. We've also started an outreach program to train state and local election administrators on how to make reliable information available to constituents through our platform. Taking a step back, we recognize that people come to Twitter looking for information, and we take our responsibility to ensure the reliability of this information, especially when it comes to how they can participate effectively in civic processes like elections. We will have more to share about our work as we approach the midterm elections later this year. As always,
이제 중간 선거에 다가감에 따라서 트위터에서 어떻게 이런 트윗들이 작동하는지 더욱더 많은 정보를 알려드리게 될 것입니다.
Thank you. And it looks like we have time for one final question. Our final
네,
question
그렇죠.
is, certain Twitter
형준님
accounts are
의견에 저도
suspended for
동의합니다.
unjustified
그게
reasons.
일론 스타일이다
What is the
보니까
company and the board going to do to prevent these types of wrongful suspensions and protect free speech?
네, 계속해서 또 계정들
As I said earlier,
밴이나
our goal
아니면은
is
사용
to earn
일시
trust
중지,
broadly
서스펜션
from
같은
people who
것과
use Twitter.
관련된
A
질문이
lot of
들어오고
our work
있습니다.
goes into evolving policies, product, and our enforcement, as in service of ensuring that the conversation on Twitter is healthy and enables a
근데
diverse set
일론을
of
까는
voices,
다큐멘터리나 여러 가지
to
뉴스들이
not just exist,
이제
but thrive on our
심각한
service.
노이즈인 경우가 많기 때문에
We've been very focused on ensuring
저는
that our
확실하게
enforcement actions are
검증된 내용이 아니면은
and we've made a
가능하면은
lot of progress around
처음부터
providing
그런
increased
내용들을
transparency when we take
찾아보고
enforcement
하지는
actions.
않습니다. 그게 다 시간인
As we do
건데
this,
예전에는
try
그렇게
to take
했었는데
enforcement
그걸
actions
하다
with
보니까
urgency
이게
before
정말
harm occurs.
쓰레기장에서
In fact, our
쓰레기
focus
속에서
has been
의미 있는 물건 찾는 거랑
on taking
똑같은
action
거라서
even before
별
customers
의미가
have had
없더라고요.
an opportunity to report violations through our reporting flows. This is enabled by the increased use
네,
of
그런
automation and machine learning
다큐멘터리들을
and
어느 정도
combining
검증이
these with
되지
manual
않은 상태에서
enforcement
보게
when
되면은
additional
나중에
context is important.
돌이켜보면 결국 시간 낭비인 경우가
As we do this work,
대부분이었습니다.
we do make mistakes. We have processes
워낙
that
편향된
allow
내용들이 많이
people
나오기 때문에
to
또
appeal
일론이
our enforcement actions
혁신을 많이
or
만들기
contact us for
때문
more
또
context
그게 사실 가장 중요한
when an enforcement
이유이고
action has been taken
또
against
다른
their account.
이유는 성격이
More
워낙
information around how to use is
일반인들이
available in our
생각하는
help
것과
center,
다르기 때문에 그런
and
저항을 많이
we
가져오는
ensure
것도
that we are
사실입니다.
responsive to these appeals
그래서 그런
even
저항과
when needed.
관련된 내용,
Thank you again for your
그러니까
question.
기존에 있던 세력들이 그 권력과
Thank
이익
you.
구조를
Thank you, Parag.
잃지 않기 위해서
One last
만들어
note
놓는
is that
내용들이
there will
많기
be a
때문에
replay available, as well as
좀
a
노이즈를
transcript
많이
following this
걸러서
meeting, which will
봐야
be
되는 것도
posted on our
사실입니다.
investor relations website. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to you, Parag, for your closing remarks.
Thank you, Krista. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join us today. We really appreciate
이렇게
all of your
끝이
questions
났네요.
and your continued interest in Twitter. Thanks again.
네,
Thank
제가
you. The event
트위터
has now
이
concluded. Thank you for attending today's
웹캐스트는
presentation.
또 처음
You may now
진행하다
disconnect your
보니까
lines.
사실 웹캐스트가 이게 자꾸 미뤄져서 이상하다
The host
생각했었는데
has ended this call. Goodbye.
그 나중에 보니까 제가 채널 자체를 질문하는 채널로 잘못 들어가 있어서 좀 앞쪽 부분에 Q&A 말고 이제 진행되던 웹캐스트 부분을 조금 놓치게 되었습니다. 그래도 이번 어닝콜 아니 웹캐스트에서 이번 주총에서 또 트위터 인수와 관련된 내용은 말을 하지 않는다라고 Q&A에서도 말을 했기 때문에 앞서서도 똑같은 말이 나왔을 것 같습니다. 이번 주총을 통해서 어느 정도 불확실성이 거쳐지기를 바랬는데 일단 결론적으로는 딱히 새로운 내용은 일론과 관련해서 새로운 내용은 없었다라고 결론을 내릴 수 있을 것 같습니다. 그래서 네, 조금 더 어떻게 좀 시간이 끌어지게 될 것 같네요. 그리고 5분 뒤면은 또 지난 FOMC 의사록이 나오기 때문에 가끔 또 의사록이 시장에 영향을 미치는 경우도 있기 때문에 그 내용도 한번 확인해 보시면 좋을 것 같습니다. 이번 방송은 여기서 마치도록 하겠습니다. 함께 해주신 분들 감사드리고 좋은 하루 되시길 바랍니다.